It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogstye Network, the show where we look at the dollars and the cents of the sports media industrial business complex. It's an all-concrete park out at the edge of town. How you doing today, Steve?
Beat up concrete park at the edge of town. I'm doing well. How about you?
I can't complain.
You can always complain. I do have a concert update for you. We always do concert updates on this show.
Okay.
This week was Bryan Adams. Saw Bryan Adams at the Wynn in Las Vegas.
How'd it go?
He was really good. It sounded like 1988 in terms of his voice. And I don't think they were running tracks or anything. It looked like it was all live to me. But, now Bryan Adams isn't exactly Pavarotti. His range is about 3 notes. But nonetheless, it was a outstanding show. He did something I've never seen before, though. And I've never been to one of these Vegas residencies, so maybe this is the norm. But he took requests. He got through Summer of '69, the big song, and they said, okay, we're going to take some requests. And people just started yelling songs out at him. And then he found a couple he liked and played them. I've never seen that before at a major show like that.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. That's the difference between like a Vegas residency where you're, part of the attraction. People are coming for fan service, right? That rather a concert tour, which is a little bit more of an artistic control. You're here to see what they want to do.
But he still had like an extensive video behind him, and there was some stage production stuff to it.
Oh yeah, it's Vegas. They're not going to give you a bad show.
Yeah. No, so he was really good. I was impressed, and of course, there was no opening act because they want you, back in the casino, not hanging around in the theater. No wasted time here,
Right.
I'm proud to say I did not spend a dime in the casino. So
well, there you go. Wynn, that's that weird old guy, right? He's one. Well, I guess they're all weird old guys, but he's a pretty strange one.
Yeah, he is. I can't remember his name is escaping me off the top.
Steve Wynn. No,
there you go. That was it. Steve Wynn, and he's built an even fancier one behind the Wynn now. If you haven't been there in a long time, called Encore. That is more snooty than the Wynn.
Oof, high rollers.
Yeah. Well, it was the same weekend. It was the Pro Bowl weekend. And so there was not as much of an NFL presence as I thought there, actually, because I've been in Super Bowl cities a couple times, and it's immediately obvious the NFL has rolled into town, but the Pro Bowl seems to be the redheaded stepchild, of the NFL year or something. So there really wasn't that much of an NFL presence.
We'll probably hit on aspects of this. Well, here even in just a few seconds, and this hurts me because I am a big hockey fan. But did you see that the flag football Pro Bowl game still drew 2 million more viewers than the Stanley Cup?
No, I didn't see that. That doesn't surprise me, though, because, the thing is, for as much as football fans like to laugh and make fun of the Pro Bowl, people watch it. That's why it's on television. It's not a total ratings bust.
No, not at all. And I actually think this is, I think that, well, whatever, we're not going to get into it, but that was the smart move because you still basically kept your audience, and I think you get less bitterness because most people, half the people probably watching the old Pro Bowl were just watching to hope that their favorite player from their team didn't get hurt.
Well, yeah, you're going to avoid the injuries in a flag football game, and if it's less risk and you get the same audience,
Yeah, I think it's a win-win for fans.
I missed the whole thing, so I don't. Somebody told me there were really dumb like watermelon tossing contests and stuff. So I don't know if he's been serious.
It seemed like it was half county fair.
Like you said, at the end of the day, they got their audience.
Yeah, and everyone in bubble wrap, which I think we can all agree is for the best. Well, speaking of games that end with bowl but are slightly bigger than touch football, Super Bowl Sunday is in the rear view for you as you listen to this, but it is still about a little over a day away for us as of the recording. Super Bowl is always interesting. We talk about it every year. We're not going to re-till some of the same soil. But what is remarkable is that whatever metrics that you want to look at, they grow. Super Bowl to Super Bowl. So no matter which one, pick from the hat and reveal that it grows year to year.
Yeah, so first of all, there's a multiple stories here. So let's talk about ads first, because it seems to be the ads almost overtake the game in these things. So for those of you wondering, the ad rates go up every single year, and this didn't it did not include the COVID year. So here's the past few. So that was an exception. This year's Super Bowl ads cost 7 million for a 30-second spot. Last year, 6.5 million. 2021, 5.5 million, and then 2020, 5.6 million. And it goes all the way down. If you want to go down to 2015, you're at 4.25 million. 2000, 2.1 million. 1990, 700, 400,000. 700,400. So you see how much it's gone up. Now, what the interesting part of all that to me is the rate went down slightly from 2020 to 2021. Why is that? COVID was obviously the big factor there. Seems to me you'd think that more people would watch when they're trapped inside, but regardless, look, the NFL has gone through some hard times in recent years. We talked about it on this show. Ratings, the American flag protest, a bunch of injury stories and whatnot. This league is just Teflon. No matter what happens, they make money, and the revenue continues to rise. It's amazing what kind of business they have built.
Those were never anything more than anomaly blips. Um, it really is amazing. They give I kind of wish they had the complete timeline, but in this article, which I think was on MSNBC, no, it was
Oh,
on
sorry. Yeah, it was. You got it. It was on. It was on NBC Los Angeles.
right.
The one there's a couple of them, but this one is by Kristen Conti from the 2nd of February on NBCLosAngeles.com.
And it's fascinating to look at the ad cost through the ages. And I wish they had the full timeline, as I was saying. They take these jumps that make it a little bit hard to kind of wrap your head around. But you can kind of really see it's interesting. It's been what you do notice in a pattern is it's been steady chunks. Like the leaps year to year, they make sense, right? They don't go there's not like a time in here you could say, well, there's where it spiked. It just picked up real estate year after year, like doubling itself, adding significant amounts where you can go from like 1995 to 2000, which is only a range of 5 years, and the ad cost had not quite doubled, but close to doubled, but so you're just picking up, it's just gaining on itself year to year by like a third, sometimes half.
Well, if you go back 5 years from 2023, it hasn't gone up nearly that much. Because you're right. Because 1.15 million, 2.1 million is like 48% or something, gain. And so if you go back to 2018, which would be 5 years, that is a gain of 1.8 million, which is it's not even 25%. So it's the rate of economic growth has slowed, but like you said, it seems to be sort of in chunks here and there.
But at worst, it's steady.
Yeah, well, it has been for the past many years, because
Yeah.
it's about that same rate if you did an exponential analysis of it for since the timeline, like Chris said in this column article, goes kind of breaks at 2015 and goes back to 2000. It's kind of hard to say, but it's been kind of the same rate for a long time with the one blip of COVID in there, and that's it. Actually, and really, if you look at it, this year's jump was pretty big because it's been going, um, like 2015 to 2016, 200.25 million. Then it goes up half a million. Um, but it's sort of like 1 or 200,000 a year normally for these, and this year it was 500,000. Jump.
And so why? That's obvious because of viewership. Because it's just you're gonna pay a premium price for max eyeballs, and that is unquestionably what and not just the Super Bowl is anymore, just NFL in general. I mean, what was it? Was one of those championship games jumped to the second most watched thing on TV?
Yeah, I have that. Keep talking because we have
So,
that in another column.
which meant it was only number two to the previous Super Bowl. So you're even having those games nip at the heels of the Super Bowl, which means we'll probably this. I heard an interview with the Fox Sports executive. Sorry, I'm not going to think of his name off the top of my head. And they asked him, well, so how excited are you to have, host the most watched Super Bowl? Because we expect the record to be broken with you. And he was, he ramped down expectations as he should as a good executive. But, he was still cautiously optimistic that by the end of, by Monday or yesterday, where you are, they might have that record. It might be the most watched Super Bowl of all time. That's very viable.
Okay, so now I'm reading. This is the Athletic, Bill Shea, February 9th. So the most watched Super Bowl ever was Super Bowl. What is that? XL 40 Super Bowl 49 in 2015. Sorry, it's Roman numerals. I had to translate. That was 114.44 million viewers. Now, for context, this amazes me even way more. You're going to know this, Chris, but do you know what the biggest network broadcast, non-Super Bowl related network broadcast ever was?
Ever or in the last year?
Ever.
And it's not the MASH finale?
It is the MASH finale.
Yeah.
That's why I said you know it. I mean, that was what, 1980-ish, something along those lines?
Yeah.
It amazes me that the networks have not produced something over the past 40 years that is non-Super Bowl related that has gotten there. Even like Seinfeld.
Right. We've had other big sitcom closings, Cheers, Seinfeld. So there'd be other chances to replicate that.
Yeah, right. And there's been a couple dramas here and there, but nothing. And I think part of that is that society and entertainment is just so vastly different from 1980. 1980, they were like, most people got about 5 channels. Over whatever you could get over the air.
That's generous.
Right, over the air broadcasts on an antenna. You get NBC, CBS, ABC. That was even before Fox and everything else. And so the world was focused on MASH. Here, if you create a MASH of today, it might do good ratings, but you're not going to get that because the world is different. And so what's interesting about the Super Bowl is that the NFL has somehow, it's part of me thinks they've fallen into it more than they've been smart, but it's become a cultural phenomenon. How many people do you hear? Our own Alex Zeese said this. The day after a Super Bowl ought to be a holiday.
Oh, I'm 100%.
Well, but why? Why should it be? I mean, because you don't want to have to worry about getting up the next morning. I mean, that's why. But it's not really celebrating anything. But the point is, the reason why people say it has become a cultural phenomenon. The vast majority of the roughly 100 million or so people who watch the Super Bowl probably aren't even football fans. NFL, solely NFL. They're doing it just for the social part of it. So for some other context in this column, last year's Rams Bengals game, 112 viewers, 112 million, 112.3 million. Here it is. So the MASH finale was 1983, and that was the year of Washington's when they beat Miami. The John Riggins year. That was 81.7 million viewers. So that was a little bit less, and it got trounced by MASH, incidentally. But I don't think back then and the Super Bowl was such a cultural thing. It was still sort of a football thing. So the world has changed. So, it's no surprise for those of you who failed Marketing 101 that ad rates at the Super Bowl have been going up exponentially because it is maintained as a guaranteed 100 million in audience. No matter what game they have, they could put like the Jaguars and like Washington out there and it would get 100 million because it's a Super Bowl,
Oh, 100%. I mean, we don't even need to sort of play sociologists here to sort of understand the reality of where this is. One thing I did was reading recently, was that one of the reasons we see these eye-popping numbers for the NFL, and probably, you could probably, they're not going to be anywhere in the neighborhood of the same numbers, but you sort of see sports rating numbers have ticked up across the board in the last few years. One of the reasons is it's always the little things, people. We can look at big macro reasons, but that they have a hard, even macro reasons sometimes only change things on the borders. It's usually smaller things. And so one of the reasons we see sports numbers going up is because they actually changed the formula for how they count ratings for group watching in bars and restaurants and other venues. So, and any time, whether it was the Nielsen's rating, the Billboard charts, it's fascinating because often, and we see this now with social media and algorithms and just how formulas, math run our lives. Just slight tweaks to what's a platinum record or what's a number one hit or how they count ratings however they're broadcasting. And so they changed their formula. They added numbers for group viewing in commercial establishments, and that's probably one of the fundamental reasons from a stats perspective that we're seeing these spikes in some these sporting events, obviously led by the NFL.
Well, yeah. I mean, years ago, Nielsen used to send these little books out to Nielsen family. I remember we got one randomly when I was a little kid. And there's no telling how accurate those things are. I remember I wrote in a couple shows on that book that I wanted to support that I didn't watch or wasn't allowed to watch or something, so I think it's all measured electronically, now because, they're snooping on your, one way or the other, they're snooping on your television. And so it's more accurate now, number one. But yeah, they didn't count bars in restaurants before at all, and now they do. I don't know, Chris, if they're relying on bars to report, a physical head count
Right,
or.
we're back to the diary. That's what's so fascinating, right? Now the diarist is the night manager for Thursday Night Football at Buffalo Wild Wings. Who's got to turn in a number in some spreadsheet of what
It's because we had 200 people here.
Right, or they're counting tickets, not people at tables. I mean, you parse this anywhere. You're dealing with a string of approximations, whether they're collected analog or digital.
Well, sure, and bar owners don't necessarily have a financial interest in helping Nielsen out, so the odds are they're not going to spend a heck of a lot of time on it.
Or their self-interest is ballooned numbers.
Bump their numbers up.
So,
right.
So their self-interest is giving, yeah, man, packed house.
I mean, but the macro point here is that all this is connected. So yeah, and by the way, the Hogs I considered buying it out on the Super Bowl. We ultimately decided against it. It wasn't because it cost $7 million. We could do that. It was just because
we didn't. Audience.
Yeah, it really wasn't the right fit for us.
Well, the puppy bowl is still available to you, Steve.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, we probably couldn't afford the puppy bowl either, actually. But anyway, point is, this is all connected. Okay, ad revenues go up because the audience stays the same. You're always going to get about 100 million, depending on a few things. So here's what I wonder. So can we see a time? It's not going to be anytime soon, where this goes away, where this game does not become the big, late winter party, late winter United States party. I don't know if we're going to see that anytime soon. It seems like there's no slowing this down.
I mean, the only world in which you see that happen is that the NFL overall crumbles, right? So, which, and there are existential threats to the NFL. We could sit here and future cast, we could do a whole show and just writing, dystopian endings for the NFL. There's certainly surface area for that narrative. But the Super Bowl will be the Super Bowl as long as the NFL is what the NFL, and those things will always be relational. So I don't see a world where the NFL is still a hot property, but the Super Bowl loses cultural relevance, right? So they have to be connected.
Yeah, I agree. Now, the only thing out there that gets the ratings of the Super Bowl is the World Cup, which is soccer. And it's not that big in America, soccer, but the World Cup does fairly well in America. But it's more of a worldwide phenomenon. They do broadcast the Super Bowl overseas, and they get bigger ratings. But I think the World Cup trounces the Super Bowl in terms of being an international property, and the World Cup is getting bigger ratings than the Super Bowl. Like if you add up worldwide.
But you almost have, but that to me is still a win for the NFL, because if the NFL is that close to the conversation, dealing with a really one market sport, that's pretty incredible, right? Like if they're in a puncher's chance, or at least the same conversation of international revenue, eyeballs, importance, cultural relevance, all of those metrics, for something that's one country versus the world, that to me almost just continues to be a bullet point of strength to the NFL.
Well, yeah, and the World Cup in the United States is hurt by the fact that the men's team has never been all that good. Is the other thing. So it's never really. I think soccer is a horribly boring sport to watch personally, but it's never really got fire too much in the United States because the men's team isn't good. And as we've talked about on this show, the women's tournament's nowhere near the size, the scope, the money, the audience of the men's team. I mean, sorry to tell that crowd of ladies, but that's just the truth. Um, yeah. Okay. So,
The one thing, Steve, I'll say to sort
okay.
of finish off this story, to show another reason where you can see just the massive sort of economies at scale that the NFL is and that these events are for them. Is the other kind of metric is just the corporate money they can raise locally, and all of the activations that they do in the host city. We've talked about this many times. Steve has been there, done that in terms of seeing it and being part of it. So that's the other one, and those things are all just going up. And the biggest data point we have that's important and that's a very valuable revenue stream is this, which I don't think is going to work, but the NFL made a pretty aggressive move to move those championship games to neutral sites. Why? Because at just 2 times, one Super Bowl host city, crazy fundraising, dollars, cultivation, relationships, all that gooey good stuff. Now, you 2 times it. Now instead of one, we have 3. And so how quickly the NFL was to jump into that as a quote unquote solution to their, Buffalo, Cincinnati AFC problem. And they got a good amount of pushback. I think they put their hand close to the fire and got burnt. But you can definitely see, well, like, look what the Super Bowl does. If we can even if we get half of that, you add those 2 holes and we've just doubled the Super Bowl, like neutral city revenue and business development opportunities.
See, I've said for a long time that I sometimes think the NFL forgets the less is more philosophy. Like I've said on this show before, I think that a dump my Thursday night football and the idea of having football on, 4 days a week. Sometimes it's better to keep people wondering, keep people talking, and kind of limit it. So what you say about that is interesting because part of me makes me wonder if it's too much partying and a little bit too much expecting all their sponsors and everybody to get in, to get together in cities. Because for those of you who haven't been through it, and Chris said, and I've talked about it before, but I did represent the Super Bowl host committee, and they really do take over a city. I mean, it's what they had blank signed restraining orders, meaning that if you're selling your crappy T-shirts that you've stolen their logo out of the back of a gas station, they're just going to come in and go, here, we're going to fill in your name, you're restrained. They take over a city, but to do that, they have all of their sponsors, all their business relationships, the whole NFL community comes in, and it starts, really and truly like the Saturday before, the week, the 1 week before. So if they're doing that in the conference championship games, then they're doing it again a week later. Makes me wonder if it's almost too much.
Well, I think that's what it was, in this capacity, it was probably smart to do what they did because it was a pretty big trial balloon. And I think the trial balloon got popped. I mean, everyone from the Hunt family is obviously one of the powerful families. I mean, basically a founding family of the AFL, obviously a huge family in the NFL, all that stuff. We know that. Second generation. And whatever Hunt Jr. said this week, he basically said, no way. He says, I think this is a horrible idea. So you have owners with the clout of now they're obviously, they just hosted one. They're in the Super Bowl. So they're also highly relevant from that angle. And And then you got, obviously, fan reaction was super negative. Other people within the league structure were just like, well, that's a major incentive. Why are we taking like one of the crown jewels of why you play the regular season away from teams? So it got every corner of the NFL world had some pretty negative reactions. So I think it was a way for them to learn where the boundaries are of too much is too much.
Well, yeah, just kind of too much, and what you just said was probably the biggest factor, which is the host city looks forward to this because it's a huge money making opportunity for them. So if you remove that from Kansas City and put it in Baltimore or wherever, it's really a disincentive for the city to kind of play in the NFL's game a little bit.
And even the whole organization. I mean,
right.
if you host, let's say, Kansas City Chiefs just host the AFC Championship game, that's a major win for all parts of an organization, right? Because that sort of shows that you got to be successful and be good and be ready and be prepared on all fronts. And so, like, especially these organizations that take so much to run on and off the field, and on the field gets so much glory, you don't want to take this. That's a moment for these organizations, and everyone from the secretaries to the parking attendants to the star quarterback. It just makes no sense actually about it. It would show you actually don't understand some of the sort of core values and aspects about why you're so dominant.
Yeah, and it's a lot bigger than just the game.
Yeah.
For those of you who haven't been through it, the Super Bowl is almost the denouement. You get through that whole week, and it's like, oh yeah, we also have to have this game. And they're planning these things years in advance. There's a guy, the guy I knew is retired now. His name was Jim Steig, but there's somebody new that I'm not involved with in any way now that plans these Super Bowl, and they're looking like 5 or 6 years in advance. That's the level of detail that they're planning, and there's a whole local committee that does it as soon as it gets announced, and it's a lot to ask these host cities to do. And it's doubly so if you make them do it for a conference championship game, also. But like you said, I think the biggest thing is, the host city, it's a benefit to the host city, and its neutral site isn't as good. So, but before we wrap up the Super Bowl thing, obviously, our predictions here are going to be, this will be broadcast after the game, so we want to see how dumb we are here. So I went on the Hogstye. I said Chiefs. What score did I say? I think I said 28-24 maybe. I'm not Chiefs, Eagles. Eagles 28-24. I think that's what I said.
I don't have a good read on this game. I think it should be a great Super Bowl.
Yeah.
It's very well-matched teams. You really are kind of getting the creme de la creme of either both leagues. So you kind of, in some ways the system worked. I think the game, so my quick analysis is they both have the exact same strengths on the exact part of the ball that are important, in that both of them have actually above average to maybe even borderline great offensive lines, and both of them have above average to borderline great defensive lines. So I think you're going to see quite the battle in the trenches. Doesn't matter if they're throwing the ball over the place or you're seeing these wild plays. It's all going to be dictated by that line play, because all four units are so strong. So I think that's actually an interesting subplot of the game. I think given that, I think I got to go, I'm going to give the slight edge to the Eagles. I have no sense in a score, but I think it's a 3-point victory for the Eagles, and I think they just outlast the Chiefs in the trenches.
So those of you out there listening will instantly know how dumb we were.
Yeah, right. So yeah, you're welcome. So speaking of, well, I don't know if it's dumb, but it's the opposite of the NFL situation in so many ways. But in Major League Baseball, we have just got a ticking time bomb. And that is, and really, you could make a case that Major League Baseball and its teams are just catching shrapnel to some degree, or, kind of somewhat collateral damage. And that is that these, I think, Diamond Sports, and I don't necessarily got my head wrapped around all the different corporate entities and whatnot, but basically you have these regional sport networks that serve basically hockey, baseball, and the NBA in their markets. Masson, is one obviously for DMV folks that you can touch and feel. They're tanking, and it's taking Major League Baseball and their media contracts, and other sports too, down with them. And this is becoming a major problem. It's like little explosions. The one that's in the news is Detroit, because it's the sort of most acute version of what's happening when basically revenue that a league has thought about is coming in for the next 3 or 4 years is now suddenly in a holding tank. And baseball is having to retroactively fix this problem rather than having a coherent strategy. And Rob Manfred is basically, got the waders on and the hazmat suit, and he's going in. But they've got a real, I mean, they're looking at double-digit teams that are going to have serious revenue problems if they're, these regional sports deals start going bankrupt, closing, whatever.
Okay, so first of all, I think the corporate structure here is Diamond Sports Group is Bally's,
Right.
and they have regional sports rights for almost half of Major League Baseball, like 16 teams. That'd be more than, aren't there 30 MLB teams? So more than half. They're on teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. Why? Well, part of it is that to get these games, they have huge rights fees they have to pay, billions of dollars, and they are having trouble there because, as we know, with the advent of streaming, apparently there's a Diamond Sports, like a streaming service you can do. I guess I've never heard of it, but apparently there is some sort of. But it's really hard for them to make money now. It's very hard because there's so many distractions, all the things we've talked about in society. So the regional sports network model is not nearly what it once was. So then you toss in the fact that they have fixed dates upon which they have to pay rights fees, and it's a big problem. So, by the way, there's a couple articles, but the little blurb I originally found on this, maybe Chris, I can't remember, one of us found it, but anyway, is a Sports Business Journal from the 10th of February. MLB prepared to take over regional sports networks from Diamond, and it's very short, but what they're talking about is that Major League Baseball has said that if Diamond goes into bankruptcy, the league itself is prepared to take over and produce and broadcast these games themselves, meaning they'd probably put it on MLB Extra Innings and what's the other one? There's two streaming services from Major League Baseball, and then they could put it on the MLB Network also. So the MLB does not want to lose their audience if these regional sports networks through Bally's dies. Now, there's also Sinclair is involved in this, and this is where, like Chris, I get lost as to what role is what in here.
Yeah.
That's the part that's tough to find. But somehow Sinclair is wrapped up into this too. But the point, don't get lost in that. The point is that the regional sports network is teetering more than we thought, and this same thing is happening for the NBA as well. So the NBA has the same exact problem, and like baseball, and I can't find the article right in front of me, but the NBA has also said they're ready to take over and produce games themselves in the event that Sinclair cannot do it, because they also have a bunch of NBA cities too. So to me, Chris, it seems to me that the regional sports network is just going to die. If you fast forward 5 or 6 years from now, I don't know if they're even going to exist. I think it's all going to be one giant streaming platform. The leagues will take back their rights and just do it themselves. I don't know why they wouldn't do it anyway.
Yeah, I can't. There's nothing to disagree with there. Not that I'd want to, but and I think it's interesting because this really is a stark difference between. This is another place where we can really draw a bold line between the NFL and these other sports leagues, because this doesn't happen in the NFL, right? Everything's centralized. It's all for one for all. They're making deals as a collective and then benefiting from that collective. These other sports don't do that, and there's reasons. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons, but so these teams are left to sink and swim on their own to negotiate to have these. And then so when you see a shock to that system, it's basically at minimum, because it's just what Steve described, at minimum in the short term, these leagues are going to step in and basically do something. In fact, maybe even go beyond the NFL, because the NFL just negotiates deals centrally for the broadcast of their product. This is actually Major League Baseball, maybe the NBA, and the NHL probably follows suit at some point if this is the trend, is they're actually running the broadcasts. So it kind of in some ways potentially goes a step beyond the NFL model right now. But basically, what these leagues are seeing is that it's too big to fail, right? It's the same thing. If you get a daisy chain reaction around, half your league or a little over half your league that can't collect its revenue you forced the economic model where they had to go eat what they kill, and then suddenly there's nothing left to hunt in 16 forests. Then you got a real revenue problem, and then you got all kinds of issues too. You got competitive balance because suddenly, if you got half your teams that actually can't even, suddenly their income that they had banked on for multiple years is suddenly gone. This isn't necessarily any fault of these teams. This isn't mismanagement, right? Like this really is a economic model problem that whole swaths of it are starting to become super disruptive.
Yeah, so let me explain something. The NFL retains all the legal broadcast rights for every regular season NFL game. The only broadcast rights that the teams have are preseason and then radio. That is not the case for Major League Baseball and the NBA. They grant the those two leagues do hold some national broadcast rights, but by and large, the teams hold the broadcast rights. Okay, and so if you all of a sudden take away, so in the NFL, if they have a broadcast problem, it affects everybody equally because the bulk of the revenue is shared. But if you have a problem in Major League Baseball and you take away like the broadcast rights for some team, like the Dodgers, my beloved Dodgers, a perfect example. They have a huge, huge local broadcast. That's where all their money comes from. Take that away, it's all of a sudden a world of hurt. So Major League Baseball, the competitive balance problem that Chris is talking about is that if you take away these massive local broadcast rights fees and then Major League Baseball starts broadcasting them themselves, that will dramatically affect the competitiveness of the game because it will change the team's budgets, which in turn changes how much they can pay players. So it's a big, big, big problem, I think. And the same NBA is the same exact thing. Same thing. So it's a major problem. And so those two leagues will have to figure out a way if they have to take over. They'll have to come up with, they'll have some business negotiations and come up with like a split of revenue that roughly equates to whatever they were getting before. Either that or just change everything totally and make it like NFL style communism, and just split it up amongst everybody.
Oh, yes, and I think that's where we're headed. It may not look exactly the same, but there'll be more of that. I think is where we're going because you're basically it's de facto happening right now because if Rob Manfred has to step in and become, I'm going to say this very intentionally, has to become the social safety net of his league in a too big to fail scenario because that's essentially what he's
Yeah.
be walking in. He can't afford the Detroit Tigers, who from their standpoint made a smart regional sports deal. They could bank that revenue. They could count on it. They're a middle to upper market urban area, long-time team. Sniff at competitiveness every couple years, and suddenly they can't. Suddenly their revenue is tied up for 3 years. The Detroit Tigers can't necessarily bridge that because theoretically they're going to eventually see that money in a lawsuit or a bankruptcy filing or something. Maybe there's still a chance they get it, but they can't necessarily float 3 to 4 years of operating expenses without that revenue, waiting to get some reduced balloon payment.
Now, what the article that Chris got some of this from is from a Crane's Detroit business. For some reason, I can't access it, and Chris can, and who knows why. But Bally Sports Detroit owner prepares for bankruptcy, putting it teams at payments at risk by Jerry Smith, Aaron Hudson, and Rachel Butt. January 27th. So that's the article that Chris got from. Again, I can only see the front part of it for some reason. But yeah, so the truth of the matter is that it would probably be better for both those leagues as a whole if you split revenue anyway. Because there's a lot of have and have nots in those leagues. And the NFL is not so much the case. If you put like our sort of Washington Ben aside when they've been sucked for 30 years because of the bad owner, all that stuff, the goodness kind of gets spread out a lot more in the NFL because they'll have the same salary cap, and so If they have competent management, at least they're going to put together good teams sometimes. But in the Major League Baseball, just as an example, how long has it been since the Pittsburgh Pirates have been any good? Or the the Florida Marlins? They're Miami Marlins now? Well, they've had terrible ownership, who are cheap. Both those teams, they don't want to spend money. Like the left side of the Dodgers infield, it has a bigger payroll than the entire Detroit, or Pittsburgh Pirates team. If you put everybody on a more of an equal footing finance wise, and you put a floor, we say, okay, we're now going to go full on Karl Marx. We're going to split up everything. That's why Chris was saying the socials. He was using that word intentionally. It was social. We go Karl Marx. Then you set a floor and you make the team spend, and you say, okay, your profit margin is going to go up because we're sharing revenue, but you're going to you have to be competitive. So you need to spend this much. That would put every team on a much more solid ground. Ultimately, it wouldn't be good for like my Dodgers, but it would be better for the leagues as a whole.
I mean, and here's the thing that I've always you always want to be proactive, not reactive. And I think this has got Major League Baseball being reactive here, because essentially this is what's going to happen. If they ship all these games to, MLB Network / their streaming service, that's a ton of infrastructure things on their side. I mean, that's not trivial, right? Like that's a significant internal investment to be able to kind of turn your ship to be able to be that kind of broadcasting that's going to fill those needs. That's a lot of internal planning. That's a lot of different departments within that corporate entity at MLB. So that's not a small thing. It's also not a small thing to step in and say we're going to guarantee the income, which is another potential path here. These 16 teams or what have you, if their revenue gets caught up in some kind of bankruptcy court or some other kind of lawsuit, then we'll back up those funds. So those are all reactive measures that they're going to take regardless. So why not take the crisis opportunity here to actually say, okay, it's broken. What's the smart way to fix it? And what's the smart way to fix it that actually, has some form of sharing or revenue, at these big property pieces, so that you can actually ensure competitive balance, and you actually have, where the whole knows how to remain healthy, or else you're just going to be band-aiding it, because that's what he's going to be doing. I mean, these are going to be some expensive band-aids.
Yeah, well, the entire model would have to change too, because the NFL has all this money because they're getting paid rights fees from all these networks, and so the NBA or Major League Baseball or the NBA can't just take their rights backs and do it themselves and have all the money, laying around.
They have
That's
to have
gonna
deals or pathways to deals in place.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and they can't just put the whole thing behind a paywall. Their audience is going to go, collapse. The MLB extra innings thing is just kind of a secondary income stream right now. They can't put all the entire league behind that and not watch the revenue collapse. And so basically what we're talking about here is they'd have to design a whole new system. Go to Apple, Amazon, CBS, whoever, and they'd have to design like an NFL style package. But it's much more complicated. There's games every day. It made NFL's easy in some respects because the games are only on Sunday and a handful on a couple other days. The idea of asking CBS to broadcast multiple baseball games at night every day, or Fox or ABC, whoever, is a big ask for them when they've got all kinds of other programming. So I think it's a much bigger challenge than for the NFL.
And the other, so the bigger just sort of seismic disruptions going on in, let's just call it entertainment, which is sports is a piece of, would suggest that if you move too fast into what you think is the future and what you think is going to be smart, and that may be smart, you're just going in the timelines too fast. We're seeing right now is these streaming networks, bloat and then have to cut and, make a move too early or the wrong move in a certain direction, and then have to tread water until that makes sense or can pay off, or you can find a buyer. I mean, you're seeing that all over the place. And so, you also don't, because the things Steve said would sort of make sense in a white room, right? they're probably going to make sense and be the thing that happens 10 years from now. Things like more direct to consumer payments. That's I buy this game, I'm not buying a package, all kinds of things. But if, what we saw with streaming services, when you just sort of like flick a switch and say, this is what we're doing now, then that's a lot of audience to bring along. That's a lot of brands that then become brand soup, and people don't know what is what. We're kind of nerds in that we kind of like to know what these parent structure is, or what the get newsflash. Most people don't, you know what I mean? And brand identity, brand affiliation, brand loyalty, these things are familial, they're decades long to some degree, and so having you suddenly, you're Warner Brothers, and you tell everyone that all of our movies are straight to streaming, and people are like, what? And then they get, it disrupts the ecosystem so fast. And so baseball and all of these sports really have to be careful, because if they just say, the smartest thing is to centralize it, more straight to consumer, blah blah blah, the audience is not going to come fast enough, and they're going to have their, hopefully will have forecasted that they're going to have some years of pain, but it'll be worth it strategically over time, because if they do something that drastic, it will be seen as a failure for multiple years. Whether it's a failure at 5 or 10 years is the gamble.
It could be corporate suicide. If you're talking about how would these leagues really end, ruin themselves, this is how, if they screw it up. Seriously, because like right now, Major League Baseball has Major League Baseball Network, and then there's an NBA Network channel too. That's really, and then they have a website and everything. That's all the media they have. They cannot just take their rights back. They have to do something with it. Cut new deals. How do you broadcast 162 times 16 games? That's a couple thousand games.
This is where the what we might call the old networks, which are just now corporate brands within a corporate holding company themselves. But if you look at the CBS, Paramounts, now Showtime, if you're paying attention at home, and your Peacocks of the world, they were in the old model of affiliate TV, local to central relationships. They don't have nearly the scope or scale that they used to, but they still hold and know how to do kind of corporate and regional relationships. So you could see potentially a CBS/Paramount, Peacock, those older legacies that have a knowledge of how to balance these things. That might be where you might see some of these new deals emerge, because then you could have some, and then maybe there's some way that you split it where there's centralized revenue, but there's still some kind of regional relationship because you're doing the Peacock affiliate in Phoenix or whatever. So those brands still have holdings that might, from an infrastructure standpoint, might be able to move faster into that dual centralized regional model.
Maybe, but you can't just broadcast 162 Houston Astros games a year on the local NBC affiliate.
No, but they've got web properties that you could.
I know, but are you not? I mean, I think still to this day, yes, network ratings have dropped, okay, but that's still where more eyeballs are than not, is network television. Your local network. Like, I've been watching this show called Fire Country. I found it's on CBS on Friday nights, and I think more people still do that than not. In the local, what is it? CBS. It's the CBS, I think. They're not going to want to cut out 3 or 4 valuable primetime days a week for baseball, and so then you have, like you said, so is the future streaming. Well, that's cutting out a lot of people if it's just streaming only right now. Maybe 10 years from now, yes. But right now, they've got to find a way to get these games on a television channel somewhere where people can watch them.
And I think that's my point, is I think they at least have they're further along at knowing where those pipes might be. Because, traditional cable, you could say there's the local, it would not be, in fact, and the cable providers would welcome this, I believe. You could say, okay, you've got your local NBC affiliate, right? And that affiliate can just have their normal programming on Channel 4 or whatever. But then, there's 1,000 channel bandwidth on these cable. You could get your, the
The Detroit
Phoenix
Tigers
sports
channel.
feed. is just channel 372. It's all the, and then in Peacock can share resources in terms of like crews and film and camera operators, and there can be, because they're already used to some of those things, and they can open up the cable bandwidth, and then they can make it available as a tab on their website too. At least they have half the pipes laid rather than some of these other places.
Because ironically, what you're doing is creating a regional sports network.
Exactly, but centrally controlled.
Yeah, I that may be the future. Is some sort of partnership like that. I don't know what else they could do, because again, I mean, the Major League Baseball network can broadcast one game a day, one game a night, and maybe at the occasional afternoon. That's it. So they have to have something like that.
I just laugh because anytime we do these things where we're kind of like just kind of getting out the whiteboard and being creative or brainstorming about what we might do, we just create old legacy models. So we've often said, how do we rebuild cable? We don't,
just build
or
another
we say,
seat.
we end up, now we're like, how do we rebuild the network and affiliate model? Which is which was the TV model for 50 years minimum, and to a large degree still exists in places today.
Well, ironically, you and I have been pretty good at predicting the future in some of these things. So I think the macro point here is that if this Bally's fails, and however Sinclair relates to it, Major League Baseball and the NBA will have to do something along the lines of what we're describing. Because number one, they cannot let their games just not be broadcast. Number two, they will have to get all the games on, and it is a much bigger problem than the NFL. So something along these lines will have to happen. I can guarantee you that they will do something like this.
And it's such a good point what you say about just the sort of all those other sports have that issue of how many games there are, how it has to spread out through the week. There's the circadian rhythms of the NFL. That's part of why they're so dominant. It just makes sense. It's centered on the weekend, obviously majority, it's centralized at one time. There's a rhythm to the week, that the whole ecosystem knows. Mondays for debrief,
This
Tuesdays
is
for,
why I say they ought to not be dumb and put it on a bunch of games on a bunch of different days
yeah,
for
because I
that
think
reason.
it clicks to people's sort of circadian rhythms. It makes sense. It works within people's lives. A Tuesday much watch game, or even go if you're local at 7:15. Just think everyone just do a quick snapshot of your own lives. You have to make arrangements for that to work, even if you're watching it on television.
Even Sunday is NFL day,
Yeah.
but if you make it 5 days a week, it's not as special, uh, you know. So that you're 100% right, and hopefully the NFL doesn't not learn that. But it's well past that for baseball and NBA. So they just need to figure out how to get their games on TV one way or the other.
Yeah, and the NBA. So NBA is, and we've already referenced them and put them into this conversation. They might actually be in better position to react, to be actually flipped from reaction. They may actually be in a proactive state because, and this is just probably luck and coincidence as much as anything else, is that they've got big media rights deals that need to get sorted on the horizon here soon. So they actually have that leverage chip, and even from, okay, how, kind of in their internal boardroom way, how are we going to do this, or what do we want to do? They've got more open canvas to sort of dictate what they might want to do, because they at least have as you mentioned a minute ago, they at least have that right now to shop in a little bit different way.
Yeah, for the life of me, I cannot find the column where this talks about. I don't know what I did with it, but anyway, yes. So their media packages are coming up here fairly soon. And the other thing about the NBA is they have China. Major League Baseball does not have China. Um, the NBA sort of infamously has a huge market in China, and that's a massive revenue stream. So I think they're in better shape financially than baseball in that regard, because baseball doesn't have a big international presence. They may have some, but they don't have what the NBA has in China. So there's that. But yes, I think the NBA can afford. The NBA has to figure this out, and they have a perfect opportunity. Baseball just renegotiated all their broadcast rights recently, and so they're kind of stuck with what they have for now. So I think they have a bigger problem than does the NBA.
Yeah, and I think where you were talking about Bill Shea's athletic article, the NBA viewership grows despite RSN troubles
Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
as league banks on future deals. So basically, hey, they've got the audience. They have to deal with the same implosion of regional sports networks as well. That's the same problem, different levels of magnitude, of course, and in circumstances. But anytime you talk about this, it's the NBA, the NHL, and Major League Baseball are essentially in the same issue. So they're dealing with that too. But it's all looking rosy for them because they have more control about what happens.
Yeah, exactly. And that column also talks a little bit about NBA ratings and how they were happy. They got trounced by the NFL and Christmas, but they were happy. The ratings were up for them. They were up, and the ratings have been up a little bit, not a ton, but a little bit. And so the league is doing fine in that regard. And so yeah, I think they're in a much better position. But that was the column I couldn't find.
And any of these, we talked about this many times. Any of these leagues that are actually using the NFL as their yardstick are already bad business planners. So because it's just not worth it. You're not gonna, and then I think this is what the NBA is telling you here. Like, hey, we grew our Christmas Day numbers. We can only worry about what we can worry about, and our audience is growing. They can't go head to head.
Well, think about how many little NFL or football leagues have been formed and die, including by some big people. The Rock is involved in one. There's been NFL owners involved in some of them, like Alex, our buddy Alex. He watches all this stuff. But he's the only one. They all fail in a year or two. And the reason is, they can't just expect it to. They have to start small. If you go back 50, 60 years ago, the NFL was not what it was. Not then. It's not what it is now. They had to build this. The NBA almost failed in the 70s. And it really took Magic Johnson and Larry Bird to bring it back from near extinction. And they've taken decades to build what they have. You cannot just expect, some little football league to appear and you dump themselves on a network somewhere and expect it to succeed immediately. That's just not the way it works. You have to build your business. And that's where all of these little networks fail. We've had some of those football networks that are some former players put them together and say it's going to be the player. We're all about the players. We're going to pay them fairly, and they forget they have to have revenue to pay these players. They have to build their business, and that's sort of what you're saying is the NBA has built the business over decades from nothing, and that's why they're in the position they are. And you can't just create that overnight.
Yeah, no, you'll see, and this is the. If you're paying attention and are interested in where sports media and sports media rights are going, this is the number one. Well, from the league's perspective, this is the story to watch because this is the house in your neighborhood that put in a new deck, refurbished the bathroom, and presents nicely, about to go on sale. Right? Everyone's looking at what this new reality is in terms of what these media rights get. So this will be the biggest next piece to fall in what the media rights landscape is. This NBA deal.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Absolutely. So it's exciting to see for nerds like us who pay attention to this stuff. Most people, and if you're listening to this, you probably are a nerd like us about this. Most people just want to know where to watch their games,
which is getting more complicated.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So that's a great point because to the end user, this just gets harder. Is at least the short term result.
Like you knew before, okay, it was channel 39. That's where I can watch my Phoenix Suns, channel 39. And now it's just more complicated. Where is it, and what network what streaming service do I have to subscribe to? And you're just making it difficult. Just broadcast it somewhere, please, league.
I would be willing to bet, and I don't brag often, but I'd be willing to bet I am 85% more media savvy than majority of people.
Oh, yeah, absolutely you are.
So, and I don't know what the hell is going on. Like, I was actually doing research for today's show, and I just saw an ad, and some publication that I was reading or checking out for Cozy TV, COZI, which is basically just I have no idea who owns this or who the people are behind it yet, but it looked like just basically what was that Nick at Night with the show old sitcoms, or like various cable channels have done this. It looked like the exact same thing.
And you're wondering what the heck is this?
Yeah, I'm like, what is this? And we had our final story here is about kind of you look, just like the NBA and their rights deal, you look to the real big players to see where the trends are. And, Disney's got a bunch of problems, or I think probably it moved too fast into too many things and now has overextended itself. And so they have to decide what to cut. And there was a video interview with some analysts on CNBC, basically talking about like what distressed assets Disney could get rid of, and that they're finding that for things like ESPN specifically, but probably goes for any of these kind of cable brands, they're hard to sell as parts. It's not as easy, and that's because this is such a glut. No one knows what's anything is right now, and so the market is just chaos.
Yeah. So what Chris is talking about, this was on CNBC. Desire for assets like ESPN is not super high right now, says Cohen's Doug Cruz. And it's Matt Ball, former Amazon Studios head of strategy, and Doug Cruz joined Tech Check. So that's what he's talking about. And I don't necessarily think this is the world's greatest stock analysis, really. It's a bunch of talking heads, but sort of the big picture here is that Disney has been hemorrhaging money, hemorrhaging viewers. They own ESPN, which is hemorrhaging money and hemorrhaging viewers. There's Disney Plus. It's been a disaster. And one of these guys on this little segment is quoting someone else on Twitter saying that the streaming war is over, Netflix won. So the question really, in Disney, this comes on the heels of news this week that Disney just is going to lay off 7,000 people. You see this week, Chris?
Yes.
And they just announced some streaming numbers for Disney Plus. They lost like 2 million. Or that's wrong. They lost actually the number of subscribers went down for Disney Plus. And so what does Disney do? And part of it, to me, I think this is a cultural part where you and I probably disagree, Chris, is I think Disney's ruined their own content by making it overly political, overly social. I don't want to plop my kid down in front of a TV and have him learn about slave reparations. Just entertain him and don't make me think about it. And there's a lot of that stuff. They've done a terrible job in resurrecting old properties, and they just keep doing it. They've ruined many old properties with sequels and reboots and stuff. Disney is not well run. A lot of their problems have been self-created problems, and now they're paying the price.
I actually don't agree with any of that in terms of the social implications. I think it's and it's the same thing about the NFL. It didn't matter then with that. Ultimately, there were other macro factors and other maybe poor business decisions. I don't disagree there. But I think I think that is nipping at the heels of the margins that does not matter.
It's not surprising. Like I said, you and I have a different view in that regard, and that's not surprising we disagree.
Okay. But I don't even think it's about my take on whether I like that content or not. I just don't think ultimately it's mattering at these levels of numbers. What matters for what Disney's problem is they own too many properties that they do not have a holistic vision for how to present. So right now, Disney owns tons of valuable properties. They don't make sense together. They don't make sense as an audience. They don't make sense as a brand. So the fact that you have Disney that owns Hulu, FX, these movie studios, they're traditional, what people think of as Disney content, plus ESPN. Marvel, plus Star Wars, plus ESPN, they haven't figured out. Like they tried these bundles. Oh, you can get the Hulu, ESPN plus Disney plus bundle. Okay, but does that make sense? Do those two things even make sense to an audience? Are those even the same three viewers or purchasers? If you are just going to own all this stuff, put it in one. One of the problems is because Disney Plus, if I go there, then I'm just getting very specific content. I'm either getting their classic content or I'm getting their Star Wars Marvel properties. It's really just a broadcast channel for that. That's a pretty narrow market when you're talking about macro properties that have to sell subscriptions. Now, and if I want to watch if I want to go back and watch The Shield and I want to put my kid in front of, an old Disney cartoon or whatever, I can't even get that, even though that's owned by the same property. Or I've got to now negotiate how to sign up for 4 to 5 different bundles to get to watch I want to watch The Shield at 9 o'clock at night, and I want to put my kid in front of something at 9 a.m. in the morning, and I can't even do that without like parsing, 3 or 4 different plan sequences. So, and then I think sports here plugs in perfectly. So no one, so you either have to go hard and say, we're going to go, Disney's going to be your place for sports, and go pull those sports rights that they already have from ESPN and go get more and just centralize everything into Disney Plus, and go that way. You can't distribute the market this much and expect it to make sense. And then I'll give you this point. If you've done that, where you've fractured your brand, no one even knows sometimes that they're love Disney content because it's not technically Disney content. Then I think things on the edges of the social stuff becomes over exaggerated because you've actually given yourself a surface area for critique, and you haven't done a smart business. You haven't inoculated yourself against those things because your strategy's not good.
I don't even disagree with you and all of that. I think you're right. I just think the social part of it equates to bad content. And at the end of the day, just as an example, the latest Buzz Lightyear movie tanked. And it wasn't done well. They eliminated a main character, the principal actor of a main, who did the main character. The Star Wars movies, the revenue for the Star Wars movies has gone down and down and down and down, and the shows have had questionable results. If they produce better content, more people want to watch. It's not that difficult. Instead, they just ruin stuff. They do it poorly, and to me, in my view, their agenda has become more important than the quality of the content they produce. And I think that, to me, is the number one reason why people they're having difficulty. And you
That's
got
the
to
number
throw
one
in,
reason you're not watching it. It's not the number one reason that's driving it down.
We have a difference of opinion, with it. And the other thing is, COVID did ruin the parks. Disney World, Disneyland just tanked over COVID because it's
that's
closed.
going to take. Yeah, you can only measure that recovery in chunks of 5 years.
Yeah, right. And then they got in a big war with the state of Florida, and so that's going to cost them a lot of money. And so that part of it is easy. But yeah, I mean, I get your point, Chris. I think you're right. I just think you and I are putting different levels of emphasis on the different factors that have caused their collapse. That's all.
Yeah, and we could debate the value of like the sort of objective quality of the Star Wars reboots, and you can make the case. They actually have done there's parts of that have actually done very well, and their move from movies to TV has actually been successful. The success of Andor's going to win Emmys. Mandalorian bought NFL halftime ad space to debut the trailer. So whatever, and whether those are successful or not sort of shouldn't matter. If I can be in one location to watch any of those things that you spent the money to buy.
Oh, I agree. Like, I don't do any of these. I don't know, subscribe to any of these Disney's properties, but I honestly wouldn't know what to subscribe to. I really wouldn't. You do Disney Plus, but like you said, is there a Disney Hulu bundle? Why do I need Hulu? I don't really need Hulu. I don't want Hulu. Disney, if I want Disney Plus, maybe I just want to watch the old Mickey Mouse shows. And how do I do that? And all of that is very complicated. I think you're right. I'm not disagreeing with you about that, any of that.
The thing that I find is one of the better examples of this, although we should return to why no one wants to buy ESPN potentially, is FX, sort of seen as the home of like edgy quality TV as a cable channel. Their executive long time gets all the credit for building that brand is this man named John Landgraft. He's his nickname in the industry is the mayor of TV. So he obviously has some gravitas. So and they're still putting out actually very, very good shows. You can't really find it on cable channels anymore. It's called FX on Hulu. So it's basically just like almost a branded content stream within Hulu. But it's owned by Disney. But Disney doesn't, want to necessarily taint its product with, let's just call it R-rated adult. I mean,
The Shield.
The Shield is a good example. So with The Shield, even though the Shield, they purchased FX and didn't kill it as something that they brought along with a larger buy. In fact, they gave it its own vertical. But if you're not benefiting from the company being seen as that's bringing you both, then I don't see what you're doing. And yes, go and sell all those things off.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, and they have a major problem. There's no doubt. Well, I think we can summarize all this by saying this. Disney, one, he and I disagree on the implications of the social stuff, but the bigger point here is that Disney has poorly organized its business and now has to find their way out.
Right. Or wait till it catches up to them if they think they were the future, but you got to make up the gap.
But in the meantime, their stock has tanked.
Yeah.
I mean, gone in the toilet, and they've got to answer to investors.
But look at Netflix. This is which I don't think I agree with this analysis, but it's neither here nor there that Netflix has won the streaming wars. But that was the and
that
I
was
think
what
that's
the CNBC call it.
Yeah, and I think that's conventional wisdom. I think he's parroting conventional wisdom there. So let's just assume it's partly correct. What did Netflix do? They knew. Remember when they broke their DVD delivery mechanism and said we're going to streaming, and their stock tanked, and they were a business joke for 2 years. They knew, but they were willing to accept that there was going to be some years in the desert to get there.
But think about what they have done. They also lost a significant portion of their content. They used to just be basically Blockbuster in the mail. Every movie you want, you could get on Netflix. They had to go out and make a lot of quality content to make that happen.
Or license it, yes.
Or license it, right. But they have broadcast a lot of quality content. They have a lot of Netflix-produced content, and it wouldn't work if, like Money Heist was a big show out of Spain that they found, some producers. If that show sucked, people wouldn't watch it. Because they have a lot of stuff nobody watches on Netflix. So they have found part of what they did worked because they somehow, whether they stumbled into it, whether they did it intentionally, they produced good shows that people wanted to watch.
Yeah, and they knew that they were going to Band-Aid themselves for a couple years where it was going to seem stark. And
I'm a perfect example. Like I don't want to get CDs in the mail or DVDs in the mail. I have no desire to mess around with any of that. But now I subscribe to Netflix. So
no, I'm just saying. Sometimes you got a strategy, and part of that strategy is knowing you're going to white knuckle it for a stretch.
Yeah.
All right, Steve. So, what is the Hogstyes post Super Bowl plan?
Okay, we have a plan. We are going to continue to broadcast the show on Thursdays for logistical reasons mainly. So we're going to stick to once a week. We're going to stick to Thursdays. We're going to we already did start on our free agent preview series. We're going to be doing our draft preview series. That kind of applies to more of the whole NFL as a whole. We'll do our annual position group breakdown here later in the offseason. Rick Snyder's Seasons to Discontent is in hiatus, but if Lil Danny actually sells the team, they'll be back for that, and he'll be back for the draft and stuff, and then he'll be back for the regular season. And then we have all of our regular written content.
All right. Well, I think we both we made our Super Bowl predictions, so that is the thing to laugh at. Oh, also, we got a little bit of action with people saying we knew nothing about golf. And
oh, really? I hadn't seen that
on Twitter. Yeah, they liked the show, so they weren't like a complete hater, but they were saying we knew nothing about golf, that we were completely misrepresenting the live golf in our analysis. And I responded. I said, well, come on, let us know. What's your take? Let us know. But then they didn't pick up the gauntlet there.
Nobody, we never claimed that, Chris and I have not watched 5 seconds of live golf,
I mean, how could we?
Yeah, I know. Well, you can. And I've watched probably a little more than PGA golf than Chris has, but we never claim to be experts. We're just giving our business take on things. That's it. So I appreciate whoever that is. I appreciate you guys watching.
We give the disclaimer every time we talk about golf.
Exactly. But I appreciate that person for listening and commenting.
Yeah, definitely. Do more. All right, Steve. See you in 2 weeks.